I'm Alexandra, 33 years old, and until last month, I was the invisible daughter in my family. Despite building a tech company from scratch, my parents always favored my younger brother Timothy, the golden child following our father's footsteps in luxury real estate. When Timothy got engaged to Madeline Burton, daughter of construction magnate Richard Burton, I was genuinely happy for him. I arrived at their engagement party in my finest dress, excited to celebrate despite our strained relationship. Then I saw where they'd seated me, next to the gift table, hidden from view like an unwanted servant. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from and hit subscribe to see how I turned this humiliation into the most satisfying revenge when I canceled their $6.2 million deal. Growing up in the Marshall family meant one thing above all else: appearances matter. My parents, Gerald and Catherine Marshall, built their luxury real estate empire through connections, charm, and an obsessive attention to status. From childhood, they groomed my younger brother Timothy to take over the family business. He was the perfect heir, charming, conventionally ambitious, and most importantly, willing to play by their rules. I took a different path. While Timothy attended the prestigious business schools my parents selected and made appearances at all the right social functions, I quietly pursued my passion for sustainable technology. My parents viewed my interest in environmental innovation as a phase, something I'd outgrow before eventually taking a suitable position in the family business or marrying into another wealthy family. "Alexandra, darling," my mother would say during our increasingly rare family dinners, "all this talk about green technology is admirable, but it's not going to get you anywhere in our circles." My father was more direct. "The Marshall name opens doors, Alexandra. You're wasting your potential on these passion projects when you could be making real connections." What they never understood was that I wanted to succeed on my own terms. I deliberately kept a low profile as I built Horizon Innovations from the ground up. I used my middle name, Claire, professionally to ensure no one hired me or invested in my company because of the Marshall name. The journey was harder this way, filled with rejections and setbacks, but every milestone felt genuinely mine. Timothy, meanwhile, flourished under our parents' guidance. By 30, he was already managing some of their most prestigious properties and had become a fixture in the luxury real estate social scene. That's how he met Madeline Burton. The Burtons were new money compared to our family, but what they lacked in generational wealth, they made up for in current influence. Richard Burton had transformed a small construction company into Burton Construction, one of the largest commercial builders in the country. His projects dominated city skylines, and his wealth had recently surpassed even my parents. What Richard lacked was the social standing my family had cultivated over generations. When Timothy began dating Madeline, our parents were ecstatic. She was beautiful, refined thanks to the best education money could buy, and most importantly, her family connection offered business opportunities that would strengthen the Marshall Empire. Their engagement after 18 months of dating wasn't just a union of two people, but a merger of two powerful families. Throughout the years, I'd made attempts to gain my parents' approval. When Horizon Innovations secured our first million in funding without using my family connections, I called my parents. My father congratulated me, but quickly pivoted to Timothy's new development project. When we won a prestigious innovation award, I sent them the press coverage. My mother called it cute and asked when I'd consider settling down with a proper match. Eventually, I stopped seeking their validation. I channeled my energy into my company, and we had recently achieved our biggest breakthrough yet, revolutionary sustainable building material that reduced construction costs by 20% while cutting carbon emissions in half. This innovation had attracted attention from major construction companies, including, ironically, Burton Construction. The negotiations had been conducted entirely through our legal teams, and as per my standard practice, I stayed in the background. Richard Burton had no idea he was negotiating with Gerald Marshall's daughter. All he knew was that Horizon Innovations, led by CEO Alexandra, had developed a material his company desperately needed to stay competitive. When the invitation to Timothy and Madeline's engagement party arrived, a part of me wanted to decline. Our family gatherings inevitably left me feeling inadequate. But another part of me, perhaps naively, hoped that my recent success might finally earn me the respect I'd long sought for my family. The contract with Burton Construction was days away from being finalized, and while I couldn't share the details, surely my parents would have heard industry rumors about Horizon's breakthrough. I spent hours selecting the perfect gift, an antique silver frame containing a professionally photographed portrait of the couple that I'd commissioned from a renowned photographer. I chose my outfit with equal care. An elegant navy blue dress that projected success without ostentation, paired with the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me, the only family member who had ever truly supported my independent streak. As I prepared for the party, I allowed myself to imagine a scenario where my parents would finally see me as successful in my own right. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the night our relationship would begin to heal. The Burton estate sprawled across 3 acres of pristine landscaping, with a circular driveway leading to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Luxury vehicles lined the approach, Bentleys, Maseratis, and a few rare vintage cars that my father would undoubtedly appraise throughout the evening. A red carpet welcomed guests through the grand entrance, where staff in crisp uniforms collected keys for valet parking and directed arrivals to the main ballroom. I handed my keys to a young attendant and smoothed my dress, taking a deep breath before walking inside. The ballroom had been transformed into a sophisticated wonderland of cream and gold. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over round tables draped in silk cloths, each centerpiece more elaborate than the last. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing the perfect backdrop for the networking that was already in full swing. I recognized many faces from industry magazines and news features. The mayor, 2 state senators, celebrities who had invested in my brother's developments, and CEOs from Fortune 500 companies. This wasn't just a celebration of love. It was a business opportunity masquerading as a personal milestone. Patricia Lawson, an old family friend, spotted me first and approached with their kisses. Alexandra, darling. What a lovely surprise to see you here. It's been ages. Your brother must be thrilled you could make it. Her emphasis on surprise wasn't lost on me. Clearly, no one had expected me to attend. I wouldn't miss it, Patricia. Family is important, after all. She nodded, her eyes already scanning the room for more valuable connections. Of course, dear. I should circulate. Do enjoy yourself. As she drifted away, I made my way toward the front of the room where my parents stood with Timothy, Madeline, and who I assumed was Richard Burton. My father saw me approaching but made no move to welcome me, continuing his animated conversation with Richard. My mother glanced my way and gave a tight smile before whispering something to Madeline. When I reached them, I waited awkwardly for several moments before clearing my throat. Mom, Dad, congratulations on Timothy's engagement. My mother finally turned, offering her cheek for a kiss. Alexandra, you made it. Don't you look nice? Her pause spoke volumes. The dress I'd carefully selected didn't meet her standards. Timothy, congratulations, I said, turning to my brother. I'm so happy for you both. Timothy gave me a distracted half-hug. Thanks for coming, sis. Let me introduce you to Madeline and her father. Madeline was stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She offered a practiced smile and a limp handshake. So nice to finally meet Timothy's sister. He's mentioned you work in technology, is it? Before I could answer, Richard Burton stepped forward. He was tall with silver hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. So, you're the mysterious sister, Richard Burton. He extended his hand, his grip firm but brief, dismissive. Timothy tells me you have some small tech startup. Sustainable something or other. Horizon Innovations, I replied, keeping my voice steady. We develop sustainable building materials. Richard's eyebrows rose. Horizon? Interesting coincidence. We're actually in talks with a company by that name, though I deal with their CEO, Alexandra Clare. Any relation? I opened my mouth to explain, but my father interrupted. Alexandra has always had her little projects. Nothing at the scale you and I operate, Richard. Speaking of which, have you had a chance to consider my proposal about the lakefront development? And just like that, I was dismissed from the conversation. My mother touched my arm and spoke in a low voice. "Darling, we've arranged seating. You'll find your place card over by the gift table." I followed her gesture and felt my stomach drop. While the family and honored guests were seated at prominent tables near the front, a small table had been placed beside the gift display, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar. A single-place card sat there. Alexandra Marshall. By the gift table? Mom, why am I not seated with the family? My mother looked uncomfortable. We had to prioritize seating based on relevance to the occasion. The table near the gifts needs someone responsible to keep an eye on things. We thought you'd be perfect. You want me to guard the gifts? Like staff. Don't be dramatic, Alexandra. The seating arrangements were very complicated. As I stood there, processing this humiliation, I overheard my father speaking to another guest. "Yes, that's my daughter Alexandra. She hasn't done much with her life yet, I'm afraid. Still finding her way. Nothing like Timothy, who's already managing our most prestigious properties." Heat rose to my face as I turned away, but not before catching Richard Burton's response. "We all have disappointments in the family tree, Gerald. Can't win them all." Their laughter followed me as I walked toward my isolated table. Several guests watched with barely concealed curiosity as I took my seat next to boxes wrapped in expensive paper and ribbon. A server approached, looking confused about whether to offer me champagne or not, clearly mistaking me for someone monitoring the gifts rather than a family member. After sitting alone for 20 minutes while everyone networked and mingled, I finally spotted Timothy without our parents and approached him. "Timothy, can we talk for a minute?" "About the seating." He looked annoyed at the interruption. "What about it? Why am I sitting alone by the gift table? I'm your sister." Timothy sighed. "Look, Alex, this night is important. Dad and Richard wanted to seat people strategically. The tables up front are for family and guests who matter to our future. And I don't matter? That's not what I meant. But let's be real, you chose to disconnect from the family business. These people are industry leaders, major investors, potential partners. What would you even talk to them about? I run a successful company, Tim. I'm not some unemployed dropout." He checked his watch. "Your little eco-friendly startup isn't exactly Burton Construction or Marshall Developments. These people deal in billions, not the small potatoes you work with. Just enjoy the free dinner and don't make a scene, okay? This night is important to me." As he walked away, I stood frozen in place. A waiter bumped into me, apologizing profusely before hurrying off to serve the important guests. I felt invisible, insignificant in a room full of people my family deemed worthy. In a last attempt to understand, I approached my father directly. "Dad, why am I being treated like this tonight? Why am I not sitting with the family?" My father looked irritated at being pulled away from his conversation with a state senator. He guided me to a quiet corner, his grip on my arm just tight enough to communicate his displeasure. "Alexandra, this event is about building relationships that matter. Richard Burton specifically asked for certain people at his table, people with influence and success. You're simply not at that level yet. When you achieve something significant, you'll earn your place at these tables. Until then, please don't embarrass us by making demands." Not successful enough? The words felt like a slap. "Dad, I built a company from nothing." "A company no one has heard of that makes what, a few million a year? That's not success in our world, Alexandra. Now go back to your seat and act like a marshal for once." As he rejoined his important guests, I heard Richard Burton's booming voice addressing the room. "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the joining of our families. The Burtons and Marshalls together will be an unstoppable force in our industry. To Timothy and my Madeline, and to the billions we'll make together." Glasses clinked as the crowd laughed appreciatively. No one noticed as I slipped away to the restroom, desperate for a moment alone to process my humiliation. The bathroom in the Burton estate was larger than my first apartment, with marble countertops and fresh orchids beside each gilt-framed mirror. I stood before one, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smudge at the corners. "Get it together, Alexandra. I whispered to my reflection. You've faced worse than this. But had I? Professional setbacks and investor rejections were one thing. Being publicly devalued by my own family cut deeper than any business disappointment ever could. I thought back to my childhood, the pattern that had repeated throughout my life. My 10th birthday, when my parents missed my science fair victory to attend Timothy's soccer game. My high school graduation, where my father's speech focused more on Timothy's college acceptance than my valedictorian status. My college years, spent working part-time jobs while Timothy received a generous allowance because his business degree was an investment in the family future, while my environmental science major was an expensive hobby. Each memory stung anew, building a case for what I'd always known but tried to deny. In my family's eyes, I would never measure up. Should I just leave? I wondered aloud. Walking out would certainly make a statement, but it would also confirm what they already believed about me, that I was emotional, unprofessional, not worthy of their world. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Grateful for the distraction, I pulled it out to find several messages from Natalie, my chief operating officer and closest friend. Final contract review complete. Legal says Burton Construction's terms are acceptable. Ready for your signature to close the deal. $6.2 million with 5-year exclusive supply agreement. Call when you can. I froze, rereading the message. Burton Construction. The company whose CEO had just laughed about me being a disappointment. The company about to pay Horizon Innovations $6.2 million for exclusive rights to our revolutionary building material. The company that had no idea they were dealing with Alexandra Marshall, the unsuccessful daughter. A laugh escaped me, slightly hysterical. Richard Burton had been negotiating with me for weeks, praising Alexandra Clare for her innovation and business acumen in emails. He'd called our material the future of construction and exactly what Burton Construction needs to stay ahead of competitors. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who dismissed me moments ago was desperate for my product. My brother, who couldn't be bothered to defend me, worked for a company that would soon be partnering with mine. My parents, who couldn't see my worth, were about to witness Burton Construction announce a groundbreaking partnership that would make headlines in the industry. I called Natalie back immediately. What's going on? Aren't you at your brother's engagement party? She asked after picking up. I am, and you won't believe what's happening. I quickly explained the seething humiliation and the crushing words from my father and Richard Burton. Those jerks, Natalie said loyally. So, what are you going to do? Tell me more about Burton Construction's situation. How badly do they need this deal? I could hear Natalie shuffling papers. Based on our research, pretty desperately. Their last 3 projects went over budget because of material costs. They've been losing bids to companies using more sustainable options. This partnership with us was going to be their big comeback announcement at next month's industry conference. And Richard Burton has no idea that Alexandra Clare is actually Alexandra Marshall?
None.
We've kept your identity quiet as always. The negotiation team has only dealt with our legal department and me as your representative. Burton probably assumes Alexandra Clare is just another tech entrepreneur with no connection to his social circle. I consider my options. I could sign the contract, return to the party, and reveal my success at an appropriate moment. I could confront my family and Richard privately. I could even wait until after the industry announcement to let them know. Or I could show them exactly what the unsuccessful daughter was capable of. Natalie, how quickly can we legally back out of this deal?
What?
Alex, we've been working on this for months. It's a fantastic opportunity for us. I know. But how quickly could we do it if we had to? There was a pause as Natalie thought. The contract isn't signed yet. Technically, we could withdraw our offer at any point before signatures. But Alex, this is a $6.2 million deal with recurring revenue. It would put us on the map. There are other construction companies who would kill for our technology, aren't there? Absolutely. Johnson Build has been practically begging for a meeting. Stanfield Construction, too. But Burton offered the best terms. I made my decision. Draft a formal notice of withdrawal. Cite irreconcilable differences in company values as the reason. I want it ready to send within the next 15 minutes. Alex, are you sure about this? This feels personal, not business. It's both, I replied, my voice steady with newfound resolve. And I've just realized something important, Natalie. I've spent years trying to prove myself to people who will never value me, no matter what I achieve. Maybe it's time they learned what it feels like to be dismissed. Okay, boss. Your call. I'll have the notice ready. Just text me when you want it sent. I ended the call and looked at myself in the mirror again. This time, I saw determination instead of hurt. The successful CEO of Horizon Innovations stared back at me, not the overlooked Marshall daughter. I reapplied my lipstick, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to return to the party. For the first time in my life, I held power in my family's world, and I was about to use it. When I returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Servers were clearing appetizer plates, while guests migrated toward their assigned tables for dinner. From my vantage point near the entrance, I could see the head table clearly. My parents, Timothy and Madeline, Richard Burton and his wife, and several people I recognized as major players in the real estate and construction industries. My isolated table by the gift display remained as I'd left it, a physical manifestation of my family's assessment of my worth. But something had changed. I had changed. The humiliation that had driven me to the bathroom had hardened into resolve. I watched as Richard Burton worked the room, stopping at various tables to shake hands and clap shoulders. He was in his element, the king holding court. At one point, he gestured toward the head table while speaking to a group that included the mayor, clearly boasting about his daughter's advantageous match. I slipped back to my seat and texted Natalie, "Send it now." Her response came immediately. Done. Delivery confirmed to Richard Burton's email and his assistants. Also sent to their legal team as required. I checked my watch. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My father was standing, tapping his glass with a spoon to begin the formal toasts. Timothy and Madeline looked appropriately adoring, while my mother beamed with pride beside them. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father began, "tonight we celebrate not just the engagement of my son Timothy to the beautiful Madeline, but the joining of two great families and business legacies." As he continued with his practice speech, I noticed Richard Burton reach into his pocket and check his phone. His expression changed instantly, confusion giving way to alarm. He looked up, scanning the room as if searching for someone, then bent to whisper urgently to his wife. She looked equally concerned as she read whatever was on his screen. My father, oblivious to the disruption, was now raising his glass. To Timothy and Madeline, and to the bright future of the Marshall and Burton enterprises together. Guests raised their glasses, but Richard Burton was now frantically typing on his phone, his face flushed. His assistant, a young man in an impeccable suit, hurried over to his side and showed him something on a tablet. Richard's expression transformed from concern to outright panic. I stood up from my lonely table and began walking slowly toward the family gathering. Richard spotted me approaching and froze, his eyes narrowing as he looked from his phone to me and back again. My father, noticing the disturbance, frowned. "Richard, is everything all right?" Richard Burton held up his phone. "Gerald, I've just received notice that Horizon Innovations has withdrawn from our deal. Effective immediately." "What?" My father looked genuinely shocked. "But you said that deal was critical for your new development projects." "It is." Was. Richard ran a hand through his silver hair. "This makes no sense. We've been negotiating for months. Everything was finalized." I stopped at the edge of their table, waiting. It took several moments before Richard Burton actually really saw me, standing there. Recognition dawned slowly on his face. "You," he said, his voice barely audible. "Alexandra Marshall." "Yes," I replied calmly. Alexandra Marshall, also known professionally as Alexandra Clare, CEO of Horizon Innovations. The silence that fell over the head table was absolute. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips. My mother's smile vanished. Timothy stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible," Richard finally said. Alexandra Clare is a brilliant innovator. She's revolutionizing the construction industry. Yes, she is, I agreed. And she was very interested in partnering with Burton Construction until about 20 minutes ago, when she overheard the company's CEO call her a disappointment in the family tree. Richard's face drained of color. You're Alexandra Clare? The Alexandra Clare? The very same. I turned to my parents. Surprise, Mom and Dad. Your daughter, who hasn't done much with her life, just walked away from a $6.2 million deal with Burton Construction. Because apparently, I'm not successful enough to sit at the family table. My father stood abruptly. Alexandra, what have you done? Made a business decision based on company values. Horizon Innovations only partners with companies that demonstrate respect and integrity. Unfortunately, Burton Construction failed to meet those standards tonight. Richard Burton was now frantically scrolling through his phone. Your company? Horizon, the sustainable building material, that's you? It is. The same little eco-friendly startup that Timothy dismissed as small potatoes has developed the material your company desperately needs to stay competitive. The material that would have reduced your construction costs by 20% while allowing you to market yourselves as an environmentally conscious alternative to your competitors. My brother's face had turned an interesting shade of red. Alex, you can't do this. Do you know what this partnership meant for all of us?
Ida.
Probably better than you, since I've read all the financial projections and market analyses. Burton Construction stock price will likely drop 10% when news breaks that the deal fell through. Your wedding budget might take a hit, Timothy. My mother finally found her voice. Alexandra, darling, surely we can discuss this like adults. Whatever misunderstanding occurred. It wasn't the misunderstanding, Mother. It was crystal clear. Dad said I wasn't successful enough to sit with the family. Richard agreed I was a disappointment. You all decided I was best suited to guarding gift boxes while the important people discussed business. Richard Burton had shifted from shock to damage control mode. Ms. Marshall, Claire, whatever you prefer, perhaps we could step outside and discuss this privately? I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. The time for private discussion was before you dismissed me without knowing who I was or what I've accomplished. Now, any negotiations will happen through proper channels, with our respective legal teams present. Guests at nearby tables had fallen silent, straining to hear our conversation. The whispers were already starting to spread throughout the ballroom. Alexandra, my father said in the stern voice that had intimidated me throughout childhood, you're making a scene?
No, Dad.
I'm making a point. For years, I've tried to earn your respect. I built a company from nothing, without using the Marshall name or connections. I've created jobs, developed innovative technology, and established myself as a leader in my industry. And still, tonight, you seated me by the gift table because you decided my accomplishments weren't significant enough. I turned to the entire table. I came here tonight hoping to celebrate my brother's engagement as a family. Instead, I was reminded that in this family, I'm only worth what you can brag about to your friends. Well, now you've lost something you can definitely brag about, a multi-million-dollar partnership that would have benefited both your companies enormously. Richard Burton stood, extending his hand toward me. Alexandra, please. Let's not be hasty. We can renegotiate. I ignored his outstretched hand. My company will be announcing a partnership with one of your competitors next week. I suggest you prepare your investors for the news. With that, I turned and walked away from the table, aware of every eye in the room following me. The whispers had grown louder, and people were openly staring now, some pulling out phones to undoubtedly search for information about Horizon Innovations and its CEO. As I reached the exit, I heard Richard Burton's voice behind me. Alexandra, wait. I paused and turned. He had followed me, along with my father and Timothy. You can't do this, Richard said, his confident demeanor replaced by something close to desperation. That material is exactly what we need for the Anderson project. We've already started marketing based on the anticipated partnership. I believe I just did do it, Mr. Burton. The cancellation notice has been delivered to all relevant parties. I'll double the offer, he said quickly. $12 million, exclusive rights. This isn't about money. It's about respect. My father stepped forward. Alexandra, be reasonable. Whatever slight you think you experienced tonight doesn't justify sabotaging a business relationship of this magnitude. That's where you're wrong, Dad. When you and Richard decided I wasn't worthy of basic family respect, you taught me exactly how you conduct business. I'm simply following your example, prioritizing relationships with people who recognize value. Timothy moved closer, lowering his voice. Alex, please. This affects my future too. Madeline's father will blame me for this. Perhaps you should have thought of that before telling me my company deals in small potatoes while these people deal in billions. I checked my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. One that just freed up a very valuable partnership opportunity for the highest bidder. I walked out of the Burton estate with my head held high, ignoring the calls behind me. For the first time in my life, I'd shown my family exactly who I was and what I was capable of. The satisfaction was worth far more than $6.2 million. The drive home from the Burton estate should have felt triumphant. Instead, a complex mixture of emotions washed over me as I navigated the dark roads away from my family's world. Vindication, certainly. Pride in finally standing up for myself. But also a deep sadness that it had come to this, that my family had pushed me to such drastic measures to be seen. My phone began ringing before I even reached the highway. Timothy's name flashed on the screen. I sent it to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my mother. Then Richard Burton himself, whose number I didn't even recognize. I silenced my phone and focused on driving, needing time to process what I'd just done. By the time I arrived at my downtown loft, I had 17 missed calls and 26 text messages. I ignored them all and poured myself a glass of wine, kicking off my heels and sinking onto my couch to finally breathe. My personal phone might have been silent, but my work email was exploding. Natalie had sent updates every few minutes. Burton Construction legal team requesting emergency meeting. Timothy called the office asking for you. Industry contacts already hearing whispers about the deal falling through. Johnson Build's CEO called personally. Wants to discuss partnership ASAP. Burton Construction stock already dipping in after hours trading. The last email simply said, "You're a badass boss. Call me when you're ready." I smiled at that one, grateful for Natalie's unwavering support. She'd been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who truly understood what building Horizon Innovations had cost me personally. Just as I was considering calling her, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera to find Timothy standing there, still in his suit from the party, but looking considerably less polished. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit from childhood when he was stressed. I almost didn't answer. But he was still my brother, and beneath the anger and hurt, I did love him. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. "What do you want, Timothy?" "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the hallway. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I believe I made myself perfectly clear at the party. This isn't just about your feelings, Alex. This is business. Real business with real consequences. Richard is furious. Dad is beside himself. Madeline is in tears. Her father told her the wedding might need to be downsized now because of potential losses. Sounds like Richard Burton shouldn't have put all his eggs in one basket. Poor business strategy. Timothy ran his hands through his hair again. "Can I come in? Please? The neighbors don't need to hear this." I stepped aside reluctantly. Timothy entered and immediately began pacing my living room. "All these years," he said, gesturing around my apartment, "we thought you were just playing entrepreneur with your little startup. Why didn't you tell us what you were really building? Would it have mattered? Would Dad have suddenly respected my work if he knew the revenue numbers? Would you have stopped dismissing my company as small potatoes? Of course it would have mattered. Do you know how many times Dad tried to get you involved in the family business? How many opportunities you turned down? Opportunities to be decoration, Timothy. Dad never wanted my ideas or input. He wanted the Marshall daughter in the company brochure to look progressive. That's not the same as respecting my work." Timothy stopped pacing. "So, this is your revenge?" tanking a deal that would have benefited everyone just to prove a point. It's not revenge. It's a business decision. I choose not to partner with people who don't value what I bring to the table. Richard Burton had no idea who you were. Exactly my point. He dismissed me without knowing anything about me except that I was your sister who worked in tech. That tells me everything I need to know about how he conducts business. Timothy collapsed onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. Dad wants you to call him. He says there's still time to salvage this if you act quickly. I bet he does. Alex, please. This partnership was going to open doors for all of us. And that's why you're here? To save the business deal? Not because your sister was humiliated at your engagement party. A flicker of shame crossed his face. That's not fair. I didn't know they were going to seat you by the gift table. But you didn't object when you saw it. You didn't invite me to join the family table. You defended it when I asked you directly. Timothy was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry about that. Truly. But this response is disproportionate, Alex. You're potentially costing Burton Construction millions over a seating arrangement. No, I'm showing everyone involved that actions have consequences. For years, I've accepted being the family disappointment. Not anymore. My phone rang again. My mother. I declined the call. She's upset, Timothy said. They both are. I'm sure they are. Their plan for a perfect business merger hit an unexpected snag. Timothy stood to leave, clearly recognizing he wasn't going to change my mind. I hope you know what you're doing, Alex. This isn't just about tonight. This changes everything. It already was changed, Tim. You just didn't notice. After he left, I finally called Natalie. So, she said when she picked up, I'm guessing family dinner is going to be awkward next holiday season. I laughed despite myself. You could say that. The team knows something big happened, but I haven't shared details. Just that we're pursuing other partnership options. Thank you. And yes, we definitely are. Set up meetings with Johnson Build and Stanfield Construction for next week. Let them compete for the partnership. Already in progress. Also, you should know your company profile views have skyrocketed in the past 2 hours. Word is spreading. After hanging up, I checked my personal email and found a message from an unexpected source. Madeline Burton. Alexandra, I want to apologize for tonight. I had no idea about the seating arrangements until it was too late. I assumed you'd be with the family. What my father said was inexcusable. I hope we can talk sometime soon, woman to woman, without the men making a mess of things. This isn't how I wanted to start a relationship with my future sister-in-law. The note surprised me. Perhaps I'd misjudged Madeline, assuming she was just an extension of her father's values. I replied with a brief but cordial message, leaving the door open for future conversation. The next morning, the Business News reported that Burton Construction stock had indeed dropped 8% in early trading. Industry blogs were speculating about the failed partnership, with some correctly connecting the dots to the engagement party incident through anonymous sources. My parents called repeatedly throughout the day. I finally answered my mother late in the afternoon. Alexandra, this has gone far enough, she said without preamble. Your father and Richard need to speak with you immediately to resolve this situation. I'm not interested in speaking with either of them right now, Mom. Darling, I understand you were upset about the seating, but this reaction is extreme. Richard has apologized. Your father is willing to make amends. What more do you want? Respect, Mom. Not because my company has something they need, but because I'm your daughter and I've worked hard to build something valuable. She sighed heavily. You've always been so sensitive, Alexandra. In business, you can't take every slight so personally. This wasn't business. It was family. And yes, I take that personally. After several more attempts to persuade me, she finally accepted that I wouldn't be convinced over the phone. Your father wants you to know he's proud of what you've built, even if he hasn't shown it properly. Please consider talking to him. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from either of them. Still, I knew it was primarily motivated by the business implications rather than genuine remorse. Over the next few days, the story continued to develop. My team fielded partnership inquiries from multiple construction companies eager to secure rights to our material. Horizon Innovations was suddenly on everyone's radar in a way we hadn't anticipated for at least another year. Meanwhile, Richard Burton issued a carefully worded public statement about unfortunate misunderstandings and continued respect for Horizon Innovations. The damage control was in full swing, but investors had already responded to the uncertainty. A week after the party, Timothy called again. His tone was markedly different from our last conversation. "Madeline and I have been talking," he said. "She feels terrible about what happened." "We both do. I should have stood up for you that night." "Yes, you should have." I've always followed Dad's lead, you know? It was easier than questioning him. But Madeline pointed out that's not how family should work. She sounds smarter than I gave her credit for. Timothy chuckled.
She is.
She also said she'd never want our children to feel the way you must have felt all these years. That hit home, Alex. It was the first genuine conversation we'd had in years. For the first time, Timothy seemed to be seeing the family dynamic from my perspective rather than our parents' carefully constructed narrative. "I can't undo what happened," I told him, "but I appreciate you calling." "Would you consider meeting with Dad? Not about the deal, just as family?" I hesitated. "I'm not ready for that yet, Tim. Maybe soon, but not yet." "I understand. Just know the door is open when you're ready." As I hung up, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in my life, my family was approaching me with respect rather than expectation or dismissal. It had taken a $6.2 million lesson, but perhaps it was finally sinking in. 3 weeks after the engagement party debacle, I agreed to meet with Richard Burton. Not at his office or mine, but on neutral ground, a private dining room at an upscale restaurant downtown. My terms were clear. This was a preliminary discussion only, with no lawyers present. Any actual negotiation would happen through proper channels with my full executive team. Richard arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably but looking noticeably more strained than he had at the party. The market volatility following our canceled deal had taken its toll, both financially and personally. "Ms. Marshall," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Alexandra is fine," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Or Alex, if you prefer." We sat across from each other, the waiter pouring water and discreetly leaving us to our conversation. "I want to begin with a sincere apology," Richard said, meeting my eyes directly. "My behavior at the engagement party was inexcusable. I made judgments based on incomplete information and outdated notions of success." "You mean you assumed because I wasn't bragging about my achievements or wearing them like badges, they didn't exist?" He nodded, accepting the criticism.
Yes.
"In my world, success is something to be displayed, leveraged. I couldn't conceive of someone deliberately keeping their accomplishments quiet. Different values, Mr. Burton." "Richard, please." He took a sip of water. "Your approach has given me much to reflect on, actually. The quiet confidence of knowing your worth without needing constant validation from others. It's uncommon in our industry." "Is that what we're discussing today? Philosophy? Or are we here to talk business?" "Both, I think. The two are more connected than I previously understood." He straightened in his chair. "Burton Construction would still like to partner with Horizon Innovations. Your material is revolutionary and, frankly, we need it to stay competitive. Several other companies have expressed the same interest." "I'm sure they have. But none of them offer the scale and visibility that we do. Despite our rocky start, a partnership between us would benefit both companies tremendously." I studied him carefully. "What would be different this time, Richard? Besides the fact that you now know who I am and what my company is worth." He considered the question seriously. "Transparency, mutual respect, and a formal commitment to those values in our contract. I'm proposing a respect clause that would bind both parties to certain standards of professional conduct." I've never heard of a respect clause in a business contract. That's because I just invented it. He smiled slightly. But my legal team assures me it can be properly structured and enforced. The specifics would be negotiated, of course, but the principle is simple. Disrespect toward any team member from either company would constitute grounds for review and potential contract adjustment. It was an innovative approach, I had to admit. And you're willing to put this in writing? To make respect a contractual obligation. I am. Because what I've learned, Alexandra, is that how we treat people matters. Not just the ones we think can help us, but everyone. I failed that test with you, and it cost my company dearly. It wasn't just about the money, I clarified. It was about being seen as a person of value, regardless of how I fit into your preconceived notions of success. I understand that now, and I want to demonstrate that understanding through action, not just words. We spent the next hour discussing preliminary terms for a potential new agreement. The financial offer was considerably more generous than the original, but more importantly, Richard's entire approach had shifted. He spoke to me as an equal, valuing my expertise and perspective in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. By the end of our meeting, I agreed to have my team re-engage with Burton Construction on a potential partnership. No commitments yet, but the door was open. Thank you for giving us another chance, Richard said as we prepared to leave. And for the lesson in humility. It was expensive, but valuable. The best lessons usually are. 2 days later, my parents invited me to dinner. Just the four of us. Mother, father, Timothy, and me. I accepted with trepidation, unsure what to expect. The restaurant was one of my father's favorites, an old-school steakhouse where he knew all the staff by name. We were seated at his regular table, but something was different. Instead of my usual position beside my mother, across from the men, I was seated at the head of the table. My father noticed my surprise. You've earned the position of honor, Alexandra. It was a small gesture, but significant in my father's world of careful hierarchies and symbolic positioning. As we ordered drinks, my mother reached over to squeeze my hand. We owe you an apology, darling. Several, actually. We've been reading about Horizon Innovations, my father added. The technology you've developed is remarkable. The market application's extensive. Yes, I know. That's why I built the company. Timothy smiled slightly at my directness. My father cleared his throat. Alexandra, I've been wrong about your choices. I measured success by standards that were limited and outdated. What you've built, it's extraordinary. Not just financially successful, but meaningful, impactful. Coming from my father, this was unprecedented. Gerald Marshall didn't admit mistakes, and he certainly didn't praise paths different from the one he'd prescribed. I should have supported you, he continued. Instead, I dismissed your vision because it didn't match mine. I'm sorry. My mother nodded. We both are, darling. And we're incredibly proud of you. Not just because of what happened with Richard Burton, though that certainly opened our eyes, but because you've stayed true to yourself despite our lack of understanding. I felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Timothy raised his glass. To my brilliant sister, who taught us all a valuable lesson about assuming someone's worth based on appearances. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen by my family. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, with my parents asking genuine questions about my company and my vision for its future. Later that week, I met Madeline for coffee. Without the pressure of family dynamics and business negotiations, we discovered we actually had quite a bit in common. She was far more intelligent and independent than I'd initially assumed, with her own ambitions beyond being Richard Burton's daughter or Timothy Marshall's wife. I've been working on a sustainable housing initiative, she confided. Affordable homes with minimal environmental impact. My father thinks it's just a hobby, but I'm serious about it. That sounds fascinating, I told her sincerely. And potentially compatible with some of Horizon's materials. Her eyes lit up. I was hoping you might say that. Would you be willing to look at my plans sometime? Give me your professional opinion. I'd be happy to. What began as a courtesy meeting evolved into a genuine friendship and eventually a professional collaboration. Madeline had vision and social connections that complemented my technical expertise and business experience. The engagement party was rescheduled for the following month, this time with very different seating arrangements. I was placed at the family table between my mother and Richard's wife, Sophia, directly across from Timothy and Madeline. My company was acknowledged in both my father's and Richard's speeches, with Richard even making a self-deprecating joke about learning not to judge a CEO by her seat assignment. The revised partnership agreement between Horizon Innovations and Burton Construction was signed the week before the new engagement celebration, complete with the respect clause Richard had proposed. The financial terms were significantly improved, and both companies issued a joint press release announcing the collaboration that generated substantial positive coverage. My relationship with my family continued to evolve. There were still occasional tensions and old habits that needed correction, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the overlooked daughter, but a respected member of the family whose opinion carried weight. Perhaps most surprisingly, Richard Burton became one of my strongest advocates in the industry. Having learned his lesson the hard way, he seemed determined to ensure others didn't make the same mistake. At industry events, he would often introduce me with genuine admiration for both my business acumen and my principles. Alexandra Marshall taught me the most expensive and valuable lesson of my career, he told a group of executives at a conference. Never judge someone's worth by where they're seated at the table, because one day, they might just own the building. 6 months later, I stood in the magnificent cathedral where Timothy and Madeline were exchanging vows. As maid of honor, a position Madeline had insisted on despite our rocky introduction, I had a perfect view of my brother's face as his bride walked down the aisle. The pure joy I saw there reminded me why I'd ultimately chosen reconciliation over continued estrangement. The journey from that disastrous engagement party to this moment had been transformative for all of us. My parents now regularly consulted me on business decisions, not because of my connection to Richard Burton, but because they genuinely valued my perspective. Timothy and I had rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing, with mutual respect that had been missing for most of our lives. After the ceremony, at the reception, I found myself seated at the center of the head table, between my father and Richard Burton. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, I'd been hidden beside gift boxes. Today, I occupied a position of honor. Quite a different seating arrangement from our last celebration, Richard commented quietly as servers poured champagne. Much improved, I agreed with a smile. You know, Alexandra, that night changed more than just our business relationship. It changed how I see the world. How I evaluate people. He glanced toward Madeline, who was laughing with Timothy across the table. It even changed how I support my daughter. I've started taking her sustainable housing project seriously, providing actual resources instead of just patting her on the head. She's brilliant. You're lucky to have her. I am. And I nearly missed recognizing that, just like I missed recognizing you. My father leaned in from my other side. We all did, I'm afraid. Family blindness, perhaps. Sometimes it's hardest to see clearly what's right in front of us. The months following the engagement party incident had been a period of intense personal growth for me as well. I'd started therapy to address the deep-seated insecurities that came from years of feeling undervalued. I'd learned to validate my own worth rather than seeking external approval, even from my family. Most importantly, I'd established healthier boundaries that allowed me to maintain relationships without sacrificing my self-respect. Professionally, Horizon Innovations had flourished. Our partnership with Burton Construction had indeed been mutually beneficial, with our sustainable materials now featured in major development projects across the country. The respect clause in our contract had become something of an industry talking point, with several other companies adopting similar language in their agreements. The unexpected public attention from the near cancellation of our deal had accelerated our company's growth timeline considerably. Investors who might have overlooked us were now actively seeking opportunities to get involved. Industry publications that had previously focused on established players were featuring profiles of our innovative approach. We'd even been approached about potential expansion into international markets. As I looked around the reception, at my family and the Burtons now joined through Timothy and Madeline, I reflected on the painful but necessary lesson we'd all learned. Standing up for yourself isn't always comfortable or convenient. It often comes with conflict and consequences. But the alternative, silence and acceptance of disrespect, exacts a far greater price over time. My brother caught my eye from across the table and raised his glass slightly in my direction, a private acknowledgement of how far we'd come. I returned the gesture, grateful that our relationship had survived and even strengthened through the upheaval. Later, during the dancing portion of the evening, my father approached me. "I've been meaning to tell you something, Alexandra. The respect clause you and Richard developed? We've implemented a version of it in all Marshall development contracts now." "Really? That's surprising." He nodded. "It's good business. Makes us think carefully about how we treat people at all levels. And frankly, it's distinguishing us from competitors. Clients appreciate knowing they'll be valued regardless of the size of their portfolio." "I'm glad to hear that, Dad. You've changed this family, Alexandra. For the better. We were too caught up in appearances, in outdated measures of success. You showed us there's another way." As the evening wound down, I found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey. The humiliation of that first night had been painful, but it had catalyzed changes I might never have had the courage to initiate otherwise. By standing firm in my worth, I had not only gained professional respect, but had also transformed my most important personal relationships. The lesson was clear. Knowing your worth isn't enough. You must be willing to demand that others recognize it too, even when that means walking away from opportunities or confronting those closest to you. Dignity isn't negotiable, and respect can't be built on conditional acceptance. 6 months ago, I'd been seated by the gift table, deemed unworthy of a place with my family. Today, I sat at the center of the celebration, not because my business credentials had changed, but because I had finally required others to see me for who I truly was all along. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a way that risked important relationships? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have canceled the deal like I did, or tried another approach? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their worth today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be made small.